Milwaukee. It's a beautiful day. For those of you who have kids who started school this week, God bless you for going back into routine. For those of us who are in the public school system, we have until September. I have until September 6th, which is way too freaking long, but that's a whole other topic for a different day. All right, so I had a whole plan for today's team meeting, and I threw it out the window last night at about 6 p.m. And we're going to do something different because what I realized yesterday in going through conversations with people and experiencing what they experienced over the weekend, I needed to do a little bit of a pattern interrupt. And what I'll tell you is all the stuff from Mega Camp, quite frankly, I'll get to next week. A lot of it's like big picture, macro picture, what's going on, what's Gary's message, all that stuff. Like, I think I'll get to that next week. Here's why. What I experienced yesterday in the anecdotal conversations I had with about 20 different agents was resetting minds around where we are and where we're going. Okay. And I took a presentation that I heard that I wasn't present for, but someone sent to me from Inman Connect in Las Vegas that I thought was really, really appropriate for the time of where we are right now in the middle of the heat of change. Okay. And we'll get to that. So I've kind of started this whole thing of lessons in the market, learned in the market of the moment. And it's a variety of content and different things that people share to me that hit me in one way or the other. And I want to share with you a conversation that Mel Robbins recently had around building self-worth and self-confidence that I thought was incredibly appropriate at the time being. So I'm going to play with you a little bit of a clip into that. And as I stated, I already have all the Mega Camp stuff built. I spent hours on it yesterday. And then at 6 o'clock, I was like, nope, scrap it. We're going to do that next week. So stay tuned next week. So the content to what Mel was speaking to, and I'm only going to play 2 minutes of a longer conversation, is all around how competence builds confidence. Competence builds confidence. And what I'm feeling in conversations that I'm having in folks right now is the change has somewhat challenged their competency, which is what's creating a lack of confidence. And I'll share with you the conversation before we get into the presentation that I'm ultimately decided I want to share with you this morning. So take a listen.
The problem with the word confidence, when I look it up in the dictionary, it's one of my favorite definitions of a word. One of the definitions is acknowledgement and self-assurance in one's own abilities, right? Like you're acknowledging and you are aware of and you're reassured of your own abilities and your qualities. And so when I look at that definition, I go, okay, that requires you to do things that, like you don't build your self-respect when you sat out on the beach. But you do build your self-respect when you went and hiked up a hill and then walked back down, right? Like your self-confidence doesn't grow because you sat out in your garden and didn't do anything. Your self-confidence grew because you learned how to garden or do something, right? Your self-respect, self-esteem, and self-confidence grow when you do things that are not obvious or easy or simple.
Right.
But like you're saying, we're not trained in that way. So what are some of the steps that people could take towards self-confidence?
Yeah. First, here's what I want to tell you, and then I'll give you some steps. So confidence is one of those topics, Jay, that we have backwards. Everybody hears the word confidence and they think it's belief, like up here.
Yeah, I agree.
Confidence, my definition of confidence that I want everyone to walk away with is confidence is the willingness to try. In research, there is something called the confidence competency loop. And what that means is that as you try something for the first time, like I was curling my hair this morning and I freaking burned my ear. And my daughter casually says, gotta learn somehow. By trying, and by the way, screwing it up and burning my ear, I still am gaining a little bit of competence. I know to hold this thing a little bit further away from my ear now. By gaining competence by burning my ear, I now am gonna try again, and I'm gonna be a little bit better. And I'm gonna gain a little bit more confidence, and then I'm gonna try again, and I'm gonna learn even more. And so confidence, at the heart of confidence is action. It's the willingness to try. And all you need is to know that if you try, you're not gonna die. You're just gonna learn something. And when you learn something, it removes a little bit of the insecurity so that it makes it slightly easier to try again. And so I would follow the 60% rule, okay? And I use 60% because
And I'll leave that with you there. I'll share with you the full interview if you choose to listen. But what I recognized over the weekend in having dialogues with many people is the lack of maybe some uncertainty or insecurity that's showing up in the way we do our business is simply coming from a place of, and it's okay, I've been saying this message quite a lot lately, it's okay to be vulnerable because we haven't been market tested as to where the market's going to go. So until you understand and get into doing the activities in order to build your competency with where the changes within the market are, I understand where a lack of confidence would come from. And where where your confidence rebuilds in where it is that we're going is the competency of doing the activities over and over and over, and having the dialogues with people over and over and over, and how you articulate your value over and over and over, and how you communicate with your peers around the changes within the negotiations over and over and over, is how you'll build your competency that will rebuild your confidence as to where you're doing in order to get what you believe your self-worth is out of this industry. Does that make sense? So shifting
the problem with the
gears,
word
where I'm going with this is a presentation, quite frankly, I stole from Mike Del Petrie. So I want to make sure I give him proper credit. But in the essence of giving you, what I want to try and do is summarize a 40-minute conversation into 5 to 10 minutes. And what he said, what he started off with in the parallels of where we are and where we're going is, if you remember back in 1999, everyone thought the sky was falling. What would happen when the computers turned over to 2000? Everyone was hypothesizing and theorizing the world was going to come to an end. You remember that? Right? And there was a lot of like energy around this whole concept of Y2K. And it feels as if we're entering into an era of 6% 2K. And that everyone is attacking the way in which that we go about our business or what they believe you're worth to be. And what he shared was the concept of people are theorizing around probabilities. Okay. And in the theorizing in probabilities, there is the paradigm of probability matrix, the probability paradox. Okay. And in the probability paradox, what you have is the likelihood something's going to happen and the attention it receives. And what you typically find in life is along the probability paradox, the less likely something is to occur, the more attention it gets. And that the least likelihood of something to happen is the least amount of, or the most likelihood of something to happen, the least amount of attention it gets. So let's take a look at the parallels of our industry. If you go back over just simply the last 18 to 24 months, we've talked about lawsuits, we've talked about artificial intelligence, we've talked about blockchain, we've talked about buyer's agents, and we've talked on and on and on and on about all these things that have continued to disrupt or potentially could disrupt our industry. You could even go back as far as 2 to 3 years ago when everyone was talking about Opendoor and the advent of iBuyer programs and, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Okay. And in the probability paradox, things that are exciting are things that grab attention. Things that are boring are things that don't grab attention. And think of it like this. You'd never see a New York Times headline that would say things are generally staying the same, because the headline in terms of being exciting wouldn't grab attention, right? And so when you think about the probability paradox and you think about the exciting versus the boring, I'm going to challenge you in thinking about the boring here for a second, okay? And we're going to talk about the boring utilizing data and evidence. And when you think about it, consumers will probably continue to work with real estate agents. How do we know that? When you look at the data, last year, 89% of all transactions had professional representation. It was the highest it's been in 40 plus years, right? And transactions are getting more complex, not less. So people are showing you the value of the services you provide. Okay. Now, let's just take a look back at the last couple of years. Also utilizing the percentage of transactions where professional representation was involved in the transaction. And we've been talking about how all these different companies are going to continue to disrupt the industry. And that isn't to say that they aren't. They're trying to get involved in so many different layers in the transaction. But when you look at it, there's billions of dollars have entered into the space to disrupt the industry. And yet the vast majority of consumers are using a real estate professional for the biggest transaction of their life. Okay? And when you look at it, we can freak out about the transactional home sales in terms of right now we're on pace to do around 4 million units transactionally in the US, which is substantially lower than where it has been in the last 2 years. And yet at the same time, it represents roughly an estimated 90 billion in commissions on an annualized basis in the US, a $90 billion industry. Yet many are focused on the 4 million transactional units instead of thinking about what they're doing to capture the true opportunity that's available within the marketplace. And so if we don't learn to adapt, you're eligible for disengagement. So if we don't learn about where we are right now, and we don't learn how to adapt, and we don't learn how to adapt how we articulate with our clients and how we showcase our value, you will be disengaged. And so standing still is not an option. So let's talk about the last mile problem. Okay. And the last mile problem in business goes like this. If you take Amazon, I would beg to guess that we have 100% users of Amazon within the space today. And Amazon knows how to get a product. They know how to help you create a platform for you to order the product in a cost-efficient way. They know how to store and warehouse the product in generally located areas. And yet their largest cost of getting you the product is getting the product from the warehouse in Racine or Kenosha to your front door in, let's just say, Wauwatosa, right? The last mile problem is actually the largest problem in the Amazon supply chain, and it's getting you from warehouse to your home. So let's take a look at the real estate industry. People spend tons of money on marketing and leads. That's true. People spend tons of money on marketing leads. They spend tons of money on tech platforms and CRM platforms. Also true. They spend a ton of money on AI and predictive analytics in order to score and source leads. And yet at the same time, there still needs to be a relationship with an agent who's at the center of the transaction that will help facilitate the most complex financial transaction of their life. And so the last mile problem in our industry is not all the stuff on the front side, because if you want to spend money on the stuff on the front side, you absolutely can. The problem in our industry is the disintermediation of the relationship that we do to ourselves. Okay? So in a period where agents are so worried about justifying their fees, let's take a look at opportunity. Okay. They did 1,000 secret shopper insights online in open houses to do this study across 30 different states and touched, I think, roughly 100 different brokerage brands. And here's what they found. 35% of leads were never responded to. 47% of requests were not responded to by a human. So someone inserted a chatbot into their platform, and the chatbot is who responded to the lead. 8 hours and 17 minutes was the average time for a human to respond. 42% of agents never asked for their contact info. 42% is the equivalent of 42% of the time I am not going to do my job to sell your home. Okay, 62% of people experienced no follow-up at all. Okay. And here's the one weird trick to grow your business. Okay, it's the last mile opportunity. The last mile opportunity that we have where we are disintermediating our own success is developing the relationship. And so in the last mile opportunity, Mike talked about there are 3 simple ways to mitigate your last mile opportunity in order for you to have success. 1, if someone calls, call them back. 2, if someone texts or emails, write them back. And 3, build meaningful relationships. Okay? Because in the probability paradox, we've been so focused on talking about the exciting, we've gotten lost in what makes our success boring. And the last mile opportunity is actually the boring of our industry, is actually where your value is needed and created the most. Right? And so getting boring allows you to be consistent. Focus on the controllables. You can't control the lawsuits. You can't control competitors. You can't control interest rates. You can't control what a seller is offering in terms of concessions or cooperative compensation. You can't control it. What you can control is your follow-up. You can do a great job. You can build relationships. You can build your trust. You can show your value. You can absolutely deliver on your fiduciary. And if you focus on what you can control, you will have success, point blank. Everything else, we're worried about theory and we're worried about all these other things. And we have to get back to focusing on what we can control and navigating the environment based on the rules that we have in front of us that we know right away. Make sense? So I share that with you because someone shared it with me last night and I said, "Ooh, I think this is the mega camp stuff can wait. All the other stuff talking about the macro environment, what's going on in our industry." And then hearing all the conversations that happened over the weekend and seeing all the Facebook posts and everybody getting all worked up and worried and amped up, I said, I think it was a good moment of time to just take a reset to say, we have a real focus on your last mile problem in your business. And the last mile problem that our industry faces is the lack of engagement in the relationships and the dialogue with our people and our follow-up. And if we can control that, you will control your destiny. But we can't we can't take 2 outs before the first batters come up in the first inning. You know? So with that, I'm flipping it over to Steph, Lieutenant Kennard, because the lieutenant has a lot of compliance updates and some incredible flowcharts to help you understand what's going on and where we are. Because what I've also heard is there is a lot of, shall we say, maybe not opinions, a lot of people who think they know what they're talking about. And I want to reiterate one quick message. Well, I'll let Steph start and then I'll jump in. I'll pause. Steph, I'm flipping it over to you.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. As we pull up here, to pull up the slide deck, I just want to first off thank everybody. We've concluded 7 trainings between the Southwest office, North Shore office, Lake Country office, our Madison contingent. Allow Zoom to share your screen. Let's see here. Got it?
Nope, you got to share your presentation.
I did. Bear with me, guys. Thanks. I'm sharing. You got it?
Nope. Steph, how about this? I'll do it for you.
Sounds good. Okay. All right. So back to just thanking everybody. Joan, Kimmy, Dawn, Sarah, Andrew, and I just want to thank everybody who has come to our trainings. Like I said, we've done 7 now between in person and on Zoom. The 2 that were over Zoom yesterday, or sorry, the last couple weeks, have been recorded, and we do have that link available. The following presentation now is just a snippet of that. In reaction to what we saw over the weekend in terms of still just some confusion, and wanted to just reiterate what we've already been going through the past few weeks here as well. So we're going to dial it back before going forward too. So how are we getting paid is the big question here. We just need to have an understanding of concessions versus compensation. And we also need to have an understanding of the method that we are going to use to address whether or not concessions are being used or compensation is being used. So we're going to focus on those offer lines, that new provision in the offer to purchase, and the compensation agreement. So again, dialing back. So just as a reminder, how we're paid as buyer agents. First and foremost, the buyer agency agreement is what sets the stage, right? So by executing a buyer agency agreement with your buyer client, that buyer client has committed to paying your commission. And then within the terms of that buyer agency agreement, it spells out how we can receive compensation, right? So that could happen in one of two ways. The seller could agree to pay the buyer's agent via the offer to purchase, or the listing firm can pay the buyer's firm's commission through a compensation agreement. And traditionally, formally, that compensation agreement was that expression of compensation in the MLS. And now that that is no longer an option, now that that has gone away, we've got to use this compensation agreement to help close the loop. And back to kind of focusing on your controllables, this is the easy stuff, getting the leads, earning the business, following up with leads. That's what you guys should be focusing on, and have an understanding and to give you guys peace of mind that this is the easy stuff. This is just paper trails, right? So we just kind of want to help put your mind at ease by stating that, reiterating that. All right, next slide, Charlie. So listing firms and sellers. So the methods to pay out. Seller agrees and approves an offer of compensation from the listing firm to the buyer's firm. This has been the traditional method. The second bullet point here, the seller, via the offer to purchase, agrees to pay the buyer's firm on behalf of the buyer. I have this boxed off because this is what seems to be tripping people up right now. And we'll go over this more in detail in just a minute. The seller, bullet point 3 here, the seller can offer concessions to the buyer in which the buyer may choose to apply towards the commission they owe, determined by their buyer agency agreement. So they're going to receive those concessions from the seller. We're going to work that out through the offer to purchase. And then the buyer has the ability to apply those concessions towards your commission. They can spell that out right within the terms of the offer as well. Or they can apply it elsewhere and just bring a check literally to closing.
Real quick step, I want to make a comment here because I heard this over the weekend. You guys have to understand something here. In the advent of change, firms are all going to have different directives based on risk tolerances. Okay. Some firms may choose to go where they're advising their associates to go concessions route. Some firms are advising them to go other routes. You have to understand from a landscape standpoint, there are some firms in Milwaukee that chose to settle the lawsuit, and there are some firms in Milwaukee that chose not to settle the lawsuit. That is also what is guiding some of the directives that your peers are getting from their counsel as it relates to the relationship with their brokerage and the advice they've been given. The reason why I share that with you is it's not right or it's not wrong. We need to get out of this whole black and white, we are better than you or you're better than us, or this is my advice is the right advice or the wrong advice. We have to understand that there's different avenues and pathways to take in the new environment. And we have to be understanding and aware as to what those avenues and pathways are, and then navigate the transaction effectively in that way. Okay. The reason we've leaned so heavily into cooperative compensation is because it's the most clear, direct line in terms of if a seller is offering a cooperative compensation, that a buyer's agent is paid. If a seller is offering a seller concession, that's totally cool and totally acceptable as well. That's not right and it's not wrong. So I think we have to alleviate the anxiety people are having around these different methods and just recognize that there are different avenues to take now and how that works within the transaction. Does that make sense?
100%. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to the next slide. So now before we get into our flow chart, again, I just wanted to kind of differentiate the two, the concessions versus compensation, right? So the concessions, why a seller might want to use this and employ this method is that we are able to communicate within the MLS that concessions are being offered. Now, the caveat here, though, is the seller may not condition those concessions on compensation use. So really, it is just a communication that, yes, seller is offering $10,000 towards concessions, and the buyer may choose what they want to do with it. They can apply it towards commission, they can use it towards other closing costs, etc. But we cannot, as a listing firm or the seller, make a blanket statement, you must use these to pay your buyer's firm, okay? If the buyer uses the funds for other items, the buyer could be covering the difference at closing between what is stated in their buyer agency agreement and what concessions they have received. So there could be, and I think this is what we're going to see a lot more of, multiple ways in which the buyer is receiving funds to pay their buyer's agent commission, all lined out within the terms of their buyer agency agreement. For consideration, we did just want to bring this up and kind of just show you guys, or just have an understanding that you're going to have additional conversations with lenders, right? So depending on how much concessions are being offered, this might interfere with additional negotiations. I know a lot of us use the closing cost credit to help with inspection negotiation, right? So we just need to have a conversation with the lender. Okay, so we've already got this many in concessions. Are we able to apply more to cover those costs for repairs in terms of an inspection? Excuse me. Thank you. All right, moving on to the other side, compensation. So this is money already marked for firm compensation at the get-go. We don't like compensation right now because we cannot advertise it in MLS. But good news is that we can advertise it literally everywhere else. You can have signs up in your listings. You can put it on sign writers. You can say so on social media, in text, phone calls, etc. So listing agents have this information available at your listings. The same way you would have a real estate condition report, an addendum S, seller improvement sheet, have your compensation agreements or a sign ready to go to show people that the seller, yes, is compensating the buyer's firm. And we like compensation because there's no confusion about where the money is going, as Charlie has already commented. It's the money is set aside. We know that it's earmarked for buyer's firm compensation. Okay, now that we've kind of set that stage, we're going to get into our flow chart that our wonderful Kathleen made up for us to kind of help, visualize all of the different ways and the different avenues that this can go, right? So I keep bringing this up. If anyone is familiar with the Right to Cure flow chart from the WRA, that was like my go-to tool. I had it pinned up on my desk when I first started practicing. This is no different. Print this out, put it up at your desk, have it at the ready so you guys can kind of follow it in terms of in terms of concessions or compensation being offered, right? So first column, left-hand side, the listing broker is agreeing to pay the buyer broker. So this is compensation. Can we advertise this in MLS? No, we cannot. What is the avenue in which we can close the loop, make sure that we've got this agreement in place? We're going to execute a compensation agreement. This to me is
real quick.
Go ahead.
Steph, I'm going to jump in here. This is where firm to firm is different. We have taken the legal opinion that agents can sign a co-broke compensation agreement amongst agents, just as you would when you take a listing. You take a listing on behalf of the brokerage, an agent signs the listing contract. An agent wants to execute a co-broke compensation agreement. Our legal opinion is that the agents can execute this. There's been some confusion over the weekend as to who should be signing off on this. We are allowing agents to do that. Other firms have taken the stance that the broker needs to do that. We are not giving that direction. Just want to be clear there.
Yes, and if you are getting pushback, please redirect them to Joni or I or Sarah. And we can help answer that question if people are giving you pushback out there. I'll be restating that as well. Back to column 1, I think this is the cleanest way. Seller is offering compensation. Listing agents, have your compensation agreement ready. If you know that somebody is going to be writing an offer, go ahead and get that compensation agreement over to the buyer's agent. They're gonna execute it the same way they would like an addendum S or something, and they're just gonna submit it right along with the offer. Easy peasy. We're gonna leave it out of the offer to purchase. We don't need to address this in the offer to purchase lines. Okay, we've got our comp agreement. That, to me, again, cleanest, easiest way. Moving on to the second column. This is where it can get muddy, and it's okay. And this is where we want to have really clear communication with our listing agents. If the listing broker is agreeing to pay the buyer broker, great. Again, compensation is being offered. Is it advertised in MLS? No, again. If there is no compensation agreement, in the absence of a compensation agreement, can we execute the commission within the terms of the offer? Yes, absolutely. If you guys don't have one available, if you don't have one executed, go ahead and use those offer provision lines. Again, it's on the last page of the offer. It is simply stating that the seller, on behalf of the buyer, is going to pay the buyer's agent's firm, right? That language can be used sometimes. It's not a requirement. And I think that's where people are getting tripped up, is that they're automatically thinking that they should just go ahead and check that box. It's case by case basis for sure. Transaction dependent, lots of variables. Now we've got an asterisk here. So if we do use this method to show that the seller is paying the buyer's agent's firm, then as listing agents, that listing agent on the other side may need to amend, and they likely will need to amend their listing contract. They're going to have to reduce their commission by the amount shown in the offer to purchase so that it all adds up clearly, right? Otherwise, if both are in place, then the seller is technically committing to paying the buyer's firm's commission and compensating the firm. So, and this is coming straight from the WRA. It does show a double up. So you have to clean it up somewhere, right? And their preference, their suggestion is to clean that up on the listing agent, listing contract side with an amendment, okay? All right, you guys still with us? All right, love it. Third column. So the seller agrees to pay the buyer's concessions. Can we advertise this in MLS? Yes, we can. There are a number of ways that we can reflect this. So we can use the GMAR addendum A, that closing cost line on the first page of the addendum A that you guys should be familiar with already. We can show that there. If the buyer has directed you, okay, I'm receiving $10,000 in concessions, Mr. Buyer Agent, I want you to go ahead and direct or ask within the terms of the offer to have that seller pay you with that $10,000. And then you would go back to the same offer to purchase lines, that last page provision, directing the seller, asking the seller to pay the buyer's firm on behalf of the buyer, okay? So there's just many different ways that we can cover all of this. Hopefully this flow chart will help with this. We also want to point out, yes, sir.
Steph, I want to reiterate, none of these avenues is the right avenue or the wrong avenue. It's just understanding the path that you are going down in a transaction. You need to understand how the transaction is to unfold, because it's important to understand those two things. I heard a lot over the weekend. You're doing it wrong. I'm doing it right. I'm doing it right. You're doing it wrong. Everybody has an opinion. And quite frankly, the opinions are what's not totally appropriate. It's what is the pathway that the client has chosen to take in through the advice of the listing agent, however that plays out. And then you have to understand how to navigate that pathway.
Yeah. And back to this. Oh, let's go back to the flow chart, Charlie. buyer's agents, have conversations with the listing agents. What is preference? So before you even submit an offer, your question to the listing agent is, because they might have a preference, you know, do you have a compensation agreement already? Or would you prefer that I put it in the offer to purchase lines, one or the other? Okay. And we can go down so many more rabbit holes. I think we'll keep it here for now. But then as a reminder too, it might be the case that concessions are not offered and compensation is not offered. So then how are you getting paid? We're going back to the buyer agency agreement. That is what is confirming your payment, your receiving commission as a buyer agent, okay? So make sure that we're having these kind of conversations. And this is where, you know, those 8:30 phone calls that we've been having, these are the kinds of things that are being brought up and discussed. So at your buyer consultations, are you setting the stage for how you are getting paid, right? And it's just so important, ever more than ever, to be having buyer consultations. All right, I think we can move on, Charlie. Again, thanks for your patience. I know it's so much, you guys. So ideal scenario, compensation is being offered, and I'm just reiterating what I've already stated here. Compensation is being offered. Listing firm and buyer's firm execute a compensation agreement ahead of the offer. Is it the case? If it's the case that a comp agreement is not executed, may we use the offer lines? Yes, absolutely. This is where listing agents may need to amend their listing contracts. If the seller offers a compensation that is lower than what the buyer and the firm have agreed to in their own buyer agency agreements, may the buyer ask for the difference in the offer? Yes, it could be the case that the compensation agreement and the offer lines are both employed. So I, as a buyer's agent, might be charging 2.4% to my buyer. The listing firm might only be offering 2% in compensation. So let's say we get a compensation agreement filled out for 2%. And then that buyer has asked me, hey, can you ask the seller if they'll cover the 0.4 in the offer to purchase? Sure, let's see. And then we'll put it into the offer to purchase. Again, a point that we did not make out either so far is that that offer provision is a negotiation, is a term that it can't be negotiated. So a seller could counter that out if they don't want to, right? And then it's just going to go right back to the buyer to cover that 0.4 spread. Lots, all right? Okay, transaction dependent. Again, I think this is just, I think I'm just reiterating what I have said already, so I think we can skip this slide. Actually,
No,
point number.
What I think is really important, guys, and I'm just going to reiterate something. It may seem dry and it may seem like we've been talking about this forever, and yet I will tell you the incidence rate of phone calls over the weekend over confusion and all of this has never been higher. And so I go back to what I led you with in terms of the video I showed you with Mel Robbins. Competency builds confidence. The more competent we help you in understanding how this flowchart will work, the more confident you will have in guiding the transaction in an effective manner.
Yeah. And then this is just a screenshot of what the compensation agreement looks like. This is just the nuts and bolts of it. We will have this pre-filled out. So for our listing agents, all you're going to have to do is just plug in what the seller has committed to in terms of compensation. But lines 23 through 24 will already be filled out. Line 30, we'll have it struck so that it reflects that everyone's getting paid at closing, right? And then you're just going to plug in your percentage or compensation percentage. Next slide, best practices. Compensation forms are firm to firm. So if you've got the full amount reflected that's being offered on the compensation agreement, then we would just get that compensation agreement executed. And we would not need to include lines 543 through 547. I've stated this already, have a pre-filled comp ready to go to send to your buyer's agents. Buyer's agents, if compensation has been communicated, ask for one or send one along with the offer and see if the listing agent will get it signed ahead of time. And back to what Charlie has already said, You have authority to sign the compensation agreements. We do not want to hold up a transaction because you're trying to wait for our signature. Go ahead and sign the compensation agreements and redirect anybody who is giving you pushback for it. All right, almost done. Okay. The compensation disclosure. So it's just really making me laugh because we did not intend or anticipate, excuse me, for this to trip people up. This compensation disclosure, not to be confused with the compensation agreement. As Kimmy said, she wished that they had renamed this or named it something different. This is just a stopgap form. I want you guys to think of our addendum AC that we had for a hot minute last fall. We used it for a month. Then the forms got caught up with the new updated language, and then we stopped using the addendum C. This is the same thing. We just need to make sure that any agency agreements out there that are on old forms has this supplemental language. So Kimmy is in a process now when reviewing opportunities. She's looking at the agency agreements, looking to see which form it's on. If it's on an old form, she's going to kick it back to you guys and say that we need to get this compensation disclosure signed. Okay. If it's a seller, if it's a listing on an old form, you will just reiterate what is on line 8, what the compensation already states in your current listing contract. You're just going to restate it on line 8. Okay. We've gotten the question, can one seller sign it? Yes, that's fine. We had one case yesterday, got a phone call, someone just refused to sign it. That's fine. We're not gonna not approve your opportunity. I just told, I think it was Steph Minnick. I told her yesterday just to upload the correspondence from the seller, just stating that they don't want to sign it. Fine. You know, again, don't get tripped up on this. This is going to be going away very soon. I think that's it, Charlie.
Cool.
Is that it?
It is. All right. 2 other things from a compliance standpoint so that you're not caught off guard. Mailings will be going out as it relates to the class action lawsuits, similarly to what they did last fall. I know many of you were caught off guard by clients reaching out and asked for copies of these. I got one last fall and I got one the other day. So I decided to put the exact copy of what the language is for you guys to have this. And how it will play out. It really is a part of the class action lawsuit. They have to notify consumers of this. It's really not much more else to say than that as it relates to the notification and it is coming out. The other thing that we will ask for forthcoming is an acknowledgement and agreement to practice changes. It will be an addendum to the ICA. All agents will need to sign it. It is nothing more than your acknowledgement as to understanding the new rules of engagement in our industry. It does not change your relationship with us in any way. It doesn't pass off any additional risk. It's just simply saying, look, my offers of compensation are prohibited on the MLS. Yep, I acknowledge that that is understood. Offers of compensation outside the MLS, buyer showing, agency disclosures. I understand that I either have to have buyer agency or pre-agency. We have been given legal advice that all agents need to sign this. Many firms are enacting very similar practices as well. And again, there's no risk in it to you. It's more simply of, from a legal universe, the one thing that you have to understand is the settlements settled us through August 17th of 2024. It does not abdicate us of any liability moving forward into the future. And so what these agreements is doing is helping us slow down to making sure and ensuring that all associates are aware of all changes. Cool. Stay tuned. Be on the lookout for that later this week. All right, wrapping it up with a little training and education. I shared with you the June and July insights in terms of what's getting accepted 2 weeks ago. Not much change there, but making sure that you're aware that this data in detail is available to you on the team meeting slides. Next up, August training calendar. Next week will be the last team meeting, and then we'll take a break for the Labor Day holiday, and then we will come back, I believe, September 12th, maybe. So stay tuned there. Navigating the new normal. I'll tell you what, 8:30 yesterday morning, we had 86 people on the call with Catherine Eaglehoff and Jeremy Reinders. We are going to continue these calls for the foreseeable future. And what I'm doing is I'm interviewing agents as to what they're seeing, anecdotal experiences, how they're navigating conversations with their clients, how they're navigating conversations with their co-brokes. and we will continue them for as long as people want to show up. I've actually really appreciated the feedback that people have been sending me emails and texts around the helpfulness that they've been given by hearing from their peers as to how they're navigating this. And we started at 60, went to 70, now we're up to 80. It tells me very much that people are yearning to hear their peers' opinions. So we're going to continue these conversations Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'll leave them at 8:30 for 20 to 25 minutes, and then we're jumping off. The other best part about it is there's been a lot of engagement in the chat section around objections and how people are handling it, questions. And so in the moment, I'll be like, Catherine, tell me this. Jeremy, tell me that. Rick, do this. Sarah, do that. Newbie, tell me about this, whatever it might be. So it's a great way to kind of start your morning in terms of level setting and trying to get an understanding of what your peers are seeing and hearing as well. Also, Mondays and Thursdays, Jeff Nevin is an incredible script practice and role play dialogue master. He is working through objections with people on Zoom from 11 to 11:30 on Mondays and Thursdays. Again, competency builds confidence. And how you build your competency is through trial. And as Steph Minnick always says, practicing on your clients is malpractice. So opportunities for you to do so. This week, Wednesday, is also the Kinetic Wealth and Budget Mastermind in the Southwest Market Center from 1 to 3. We roughly have 50 to 60 people who show up every week or every month trying to understand how to best maximize their wealth potential within the world of real estate. Wednesday, August 28th, Phil Jones is hosting a Zoom that we will also be hosting in the Southwest Training Center in New Berlin. Exactly what to say, demonstrate your value to buyers and get paid what you are worth. Phil gave an incredible presentation at MegaCamp, is an incredibly accomplished author all around the art of communication. Last two things, MREA podcast notes I shared with you. They are interviewing agents every Monday, and then they are dropping the notes from the conversation on Thursday, all around what's going on and how people are navigating and how they're effectively pivoting as to how the industry is changing, how they do business. Highly recommend it. And last thing, I'm going to jump in here is the KW Milwaukee Agent Hub. I'm going to show this to you live, okay? Because in the Agent Hub, guys, you have access to everything you might need. So for example, this morning, someone may be asking the team meeting slides. Team meeting slides are updated every Tuesday. Boom, you can download them. If you want to understand articulating your value and all the resources that are available to you in that, there's social posts, there's NAR resources, KWRI resources, scripts, dialogues, whatever you might need. The lore reports are in here. And then also, it's kind of a foreshadow into next week. All of the information related to MegaCamp for 2024 has already been downloaded. And the coolest part about MegaCamp this year, if you're interested, is we'll make sure that all of the stuff is in there. All the stuff for MegaCamp, all of the panels have one-pager breakdowns as to what made that person incredibly successful. And they broke it down by if it was events, if it was social media, if it was investing, if it was YouTube content. They broke all those down so that you can download the MegaCamp one-pagers from everybody who is on stage. All of it is already uploaded to our Agent Hub resources. All right, with that, I'm going to leave you with this last little nugget. And it's kind of to wrap a bow on the conversation that we've been having. Guys, you aren't alone in all of this. We're working through it with you together. And as a reminder, we are figuring it out as we go. So
the two things for confidence that we can do. The first is remember that competence builds confidence, not praise. Like telling your kid they're amazing is not going to make them feel like they're amazing. It's the competence, like helping them develop the skills.
Yes.
And those skills don't have to be that you're like a star violinist or tennis player. It can be that you know how to cook or put the dishes away. Just a functioning individual.
How do you raise a confident human?
The two things.
We're in a skills-based environment, and you'll be able to sharpen your skills to showcase your value. Sound good? We're here to help you with it. If you got questions, I understand it's an interesting time. We're here to help and we're here to serve. Guys, be great, take market share, and we'll look forward to hearing you next week. Thanks, guys.